What is up? Welcome back to Fudge Muppet. My name is Scott, and today I have an awesome comprehensive starter guide to starships. From shipbuilding to ship combat, from crew to skills, this will be your full explanation of all the systems, along with some tips so that you can take to the stars and begin your adventure with your best foot forward. Do make sure you are subscribed to the channel because there is an enormous amount of Starfield content coming your way, plenty of starter guides like this, and our classic role-playing builds yet to arrive. Be sure to check out our previous videos as well. But starting with the basics, let's talk functionality. Flying may look a little overwhelming at first, and there's lots of things going on in the HUD, but when you break it down, it's quite straightforward. In the center is the reticule for aiming, and hovering this over an enemy at the required range allows you to lock on. And when you first get your ship, you will have 3 weapons, one each assigned to right trigger, left trigger, and the Y button, or keyboard equivalents. You can also change which weapon is assigned to which control later. The left stick, pushed forward or pulled back, is what determines your speed. You can see your acceleration setting on the left here, and you will notice this little white bar section. This is the sweet spot for optimal maneuverability. So you may be traveling full speed and need to turn, and so you would optimally slow down so that your acceleration is in the middle of the white bar. It's something to keep in mind for space fights. You also click the left stick to boost, and the amount of boost available is seen here. Some ship parts grant the ability to use thrusters to maneuver horizontally and vertically, allowing you to function like a weapons platform or to do some Tokyo drifting in space. This is done by holding RB. The next very important part is power allocation. In the left corner of the screen, you'll see this horizontal bar with several blue bars highlighted. This is your total unallocated power, which can then, with the D-pad, be allocated to several different systems represented by the vertical bars, including your 3 weapons, your engine, your shield, and your grav drive. The more power allocated, the more effective that component will be. The grayed out bars represent the potential allocation, and the blue bars how much is currently allocated. Upgrading your reactor will give you more total power to allocate. In the opposite corner, your shield and hull, your ship health, are represented by this number and this bar. Your shield regenerates after not being hit for a time, but your ship health, if damaged when your shield is down, requires ship parts to repair, if you have them available. Clicking the right stick will use them, and also your actual ship functions can be damaged as well, represented in the left corner by these flashing red bars, which limit the capabilities of the respective parts. You can also go to a ship services technician to repair your ship for credits. When it comes to the fighting, fire away with your weapons, and if you keep your target in your reticule, it will begin locking on, and once locked, your weapons will target the enemy ship much easier. There are several weapon types that excel at different things, such as taking down shields, doing more hull damage, or even enemy ship part damage, which we can talk more about in the building section. Also, with the skill targeting systems, you can press X when locked in order to more specifically aim at certain sections of the enemy ship, such as engines. If they are taken out with targeting, or perhaps you have disabled them with EM weapons, you are able to dock and board the ship and take things up close and personal. Now it is possible to steal that ship as well. Your ship also has a grav drive and fuel tanks that determine your ability to traverse the universe. Multiple or bigger fuel tanks will increase the maximum amount of fuel your ship can hold, so functionally it can reach further, and a better grav drive will contribute to this also, allowing you to get more out of the fuel that you have available. This can be quantified in the map menu by this bar. As a quick note, you don't have to manually refuel or anything like that, and you can also escape from combat using the grav drive, but you will want to quickly allocate power to it in those instances as to speed up the escape. The last thing to mention briefly in ship functionality is that your ship's mass determines its mobility. These are scores that can be seen in the ship menu, but we'll talk more about that when we get to the building. Okay, before we get into building your own ship, I will explain how to buy new ships. There are several spaceports and star stations throughout the galaxy that have a ship services technician. You can repair your ship here if it has sustained damage, but you can also ask them what ships they have for sale. This will open up a menu where you can cycle through all the various offerings, but they are expensive, and you must note that some ships will have a different class, A, B, or C. A class is the default class that everyone can fly, but classes B and C can only be flown by someone with rank 3 and 4 of the piloting skill, so don't make the mistake of buying a beast of a ship that you can't even fly. There will be different ships for sale depending on where in the galaxy you are, and if you have an outpost and have constructed a large landing pad, you can also buy and modify ships from here. But let's get into the good stuff and talk shipbuilding. There is a lot to this system, but in order to begin the process, it is very similar to buying. Just go to a ship services technician and select the modify ship option. This will bring you to an interface like this. You can cycle through all the ships that you own, but pressing the start button will set your desired one as your home ship, which is essentially the ship that you are currently using. Before we get to moving parts, there is the option to press A to upgrade, and this allows you to cycle through the parts of the ship you already have and easily replace them with the upgraded versions of them, more expensive with better statistics. But in order to do the more intense building, we press the X button to modify our ship, and this is the interface where we can drag and drop and snap pieces into our desired configuration. This is where all the creativity happens. Press A in an open space to open the ship part menu, where you can cycle through all the different lists of parts. There are multiple manufacturers, some parts differing in stats, some just differing in looks, and it is important to note here that you won't be able to see all the parts available from the one place. You may, for instance, go to different star yards or planets and see that there are other brands and parts available, so shop around. A ship is made up of many different parts. Most are essential and others are entirely optional, statistical or aesthetic bonuses. The little white circles indicate places that the currently selected item can be snapped onto. The orientation of some parts can be flipped in several directions by pressing the Y button, but not all parts, some can't. And also with some parts selected, you can press right or left on the D-pad to cycle through the variants. For example, taking a 2x1 Captain's Quarters hab, selecting it and cycling through the other options. It is the same on the building menu itself, of course only for parts that actually have variants. While in the interface, you can also use up or down on the D-pad to lower or raise the view, right and left trigger to zoom in or zoom out. Click in the left stick while hovering the cursor over a part to change the color to your heart's desire. And just a little tip here, you will notice that you will have the new made colors in the bottom tiles for easier application. However, if you exit the shipbuilding session, these tiles will reset to the defaults. If you re-enter to add a new part at a later date and want to copy the exact color scheme you have, go to edit the color on a part that already has the scheme, select each color and adjust one of the bars back and forth once so it is the same, and then press A to accept, and then they will be in the color tile section again for easy transfer to your new parts. However, if your entire ship is using the exact same color scheme, you can select the whole ship and just edit the color that way. As I mentioned before, there are classes of ships, and this is determined by the class of the reactor. The first class is A, followed by B and C, which require respectively ranks 3 and 4 of the piloting skill to use. When building your ship, also note that some parts will have a B or C ranking, which require not only the skill, but the reactor needs to be of the corresponding class. So for example, say you have piloting rank 4, so you can use C-class ships, and your ship has a B-class reactor, you still can't use C-class weapons until you upgrade your reactor to a C-class, so be sure to check the requirements. Some parts are also dependent on skills like Piloting 1 or Starship Design 2, but I'll touch more on these in the skills section of this video. Now, when building a ship, it isn't truly anything goes. There are required parts for function. For instance, you need an engine, a reactor, a cockpit, a grav drive, a fuel tank, a docking port, and a landing bay, as well as landing gear, the amount of which needed varies depending on the mass of your ship. You will of course want a shield and weapons and cargo, but if for whatever reason you want to forego these, you actually can. The cockpit comes with some default cargo space. Here is an example of one of the most bare bones minimalist ships that you can make, essentially a small space taxi. Also, you must note that the landing bay must be attached to a hab. Some attach from the side and most do so from underneath. Same goes for a docker port, but some of these can attach from the top, the side, and even underneath as well. There is a whole host of purely structural components which can be used creatively to give the aesthetic you desire. Grilled type reactor looking thingies, braking engines, bumpers, weapon mounts, windows, cowls, wings, braces, and more. In terms of raw structure of a ship, there is so much potential for customization, lots of aesthetic structural options, as well as a wide variety of habs and potential configurations, which allows you to essentially have a traveling player home. However, unlike a bought apartment or an outpost, you can't configure the exact placement of furniture within your ship, the placement of which is determined by external factors such as the type and brand of the hab you select, for example, Captain's Quarters versus Infirmary, or Hopetech versus Stroud Eklund, But also the adjacent and adjoining habs, landing bays, and docking ports can also impact the internal layout of the furniture, adding ladders and doors where necessary. Also, windows affect it for obvious reasons, and I have to say, looking out the spaceship windows is something that just never gets old for me. It's so immersive. It's why my ship here has windows on near every floor. But let's talk about the actual variations of the habs themselves. Habs include things like living quarters, workshops, science labs, engineering bays, battle stations, all-in-one berths, which include beds and other things like cooking stations, for those who desire a more minimalist approach. Workshops and science labs will bring benefits of different crafting stations in-house and on the move, but certain habs also confer benefits in terms of crew stations, which increases the total active crew number possible, and passenger slots, which is used during missions where you deliver settlers to their new outpost homes. The use cases are broad, and it depends on what kind of character you are playing, but I would like to give one piece of advice, and that is to make sure you have a bed from a captain's quarters or an all-in-one berth, because A, you can use it to restore your health after a tough mission and not waste medpacks. B, you will gain the well-rested XP bonus of 10% for a time, and it's 15% if you have a romanced companion with you. Over a long playtime, having the well-rested benefit can make a serious difference to your leveling pace, and having a bed inside your ship makes it the most convenient to use. Ultimately, there is lots of awesome creativity with the habs and structural components. I adore the 2x4 living quarters and battle station. It truly makes you feel like you have your own Normandy or Ebon Hawk. However, do bear in mind that your ship has a mass value and a mobility value, and these work against each other. The more mass your ship has, the more it takes away from mobility. The way to counter this is to add more or more powerful engines, but there will eventually be a limit where you can't have maximum mobility no matter how powerful your engines are. Experiment with it, but personally I like a minimum mobility of 70, obviously preferring 100. There will be a degree of compromise in your shipbuilding, but you can work out some creative solutions. Also, a helpful tip, but you may notice that in your cargo you'll often have random items you didn't find, plenty of misc items mostly. These, my friend, are what comes with the habs. It's all the misc clutter that is strewn about the ship, a bunch of the small details. If you sell it will disappear. Speaking of cargo, you can add more, but that can also weigh you down. But in essence, it is a giant inventory. It makes exploring and looting much more manageable by allowing you to return to your ship and drop off loot without having to sell it immediately. And a handy facet of the game is when you go to a city or settlement to a merchant, you can sell directly from your ship cargo. You don't have to trek each chunk of loot over to them individually. At the end of the day, more cargo means more space, and you may want that especially if you are doing certain cargo hauling missions where the required transfers are in the thousands of kilos. Also, if you join the Crimson Fleet, you can get access to shielded cargo and signal jammers. The shielded cargo allows you to store contraband inside your cargo and have a chance to bypass the scans that take place as you enter a United Colonies or Freestar Planet's orbit. The signal jammers increase the chances of passing this check, but do be aware that this will never work if you have contraband in your personal inventory. It must be in your cargo. Let's talk weapons. There is a lot of options for weapons, from missile launchers to pulse weapons to lasers to particle beams to auto turrets to belting ballistic cannons. There are lots of options to pick from. Each one has individual stats for shield and hull damage, as well as several other minutiae, but I've found it really comes down to personal preference. Generally speaking, ballistics does more hull damage, lasers do more shield damage, and particle beams do a more even split. You can place several weapons, even multiple of the same type, for increased potential output, but remember you need the reactor power for it, and personally I prefer to, especially in the early game, have only 2 weapons so that I can run them more efficiently. However, absolutely do not make the mistake of only having weapons that deal good damage to either shield or hull. I made that mistake and I could not get through shields without a crazy struggle. For my gunslinger character, I managed to get away with using only particle beams that did balanced damage to shield and hull, so I got by with just that. But as you can see, you can also turn your ship into a giant weapons platform if you so desire. There is lots of flexibility here. Depending on the weapon, there will be limitations to how many of them you can have, and there will be a warning error when you have placed too many. There is a similar limitation with the amount of engines that you can have at once. Speaking of errors, you can press the start button to open a menu which shows a list of warnings and errors if you have any, and if you press RB to flick to the next section, here you can assign your weapons to slots of your choice. And here you can also press X to rename your ship if you like. It is worth noting that there are also limitations on the total width and length of the ship, but they are generous, and I haven't yet run into any problems designing the ship I desire. I think that covers pretty much all of the shipbuilding. Let's round out your knowledge with explaining how your ship crew works. Firstly, you don't have to have a ship crew at all, but it is an advantage you may as well take. If you go to the ship menu and press Y, here you can manage your companions and crew at outposts and your ship. With no skill investment, you can assign up to 3 active crew members to your ship, provided your ship has the crew station space to accommodate. Now, you may be wondering why. Besides the role-playing fun of having a full ship crew of companions like in Mass Effect or KOTOR, companions give tangible benefits to your ship via their skills. Not all companions have skills that benefit the ship, but many do. For instance, Sarah Morgan, likely your first companion, has the astrodynamic skill which improves grav drive efficiency, meaning you can travel further with the same amount of fuel. And so adding her to your active crew, she confers this ability to you, so that functionally it's as if you had this skill. You can also hire additional crew at several of the bars that are found around the galaxy, and many of these members have specific skill benefits for ships that can be used to cover for your inadequacies in those certain areas. You may find though that you want more than 3 active crew, and in order to do so you're going to need the skill Ship Command, which is a tier 4 social skill. It requires a fair bit of investment to reach, but at 4 ranks this expands your potential crew number to 8 active members, so it may be worthwhile working on the social skill group if it is your desire to have a fully stacked battleship situation. There are of course many other skills that factor into your starship's performance, and the majority of which can be found in the tech tree. In fact, everything in here besides security, robotics and the boost pack skills is related to starships. There are a few others in the science tree, astrodynamics and anetronic fusion, but in my opinion you can just focus on the tech skills and find crew to account for those two. Piloting is probably the most essential skill of the lot, and as I've mentioned, this is what allows you to, at 4 ranks, pilot Class B and C ships, which make a huge difference to combat, especially on characters with little or no investment in the tech tree. Most of the skills are related to improving specific facets of the ship, like shields, engines, certain weapon systems, ship repair, but there is also Starship Design, which allows you to buy experimental parts for your ship, which may be worthwhile for the more invested pilots, but still, I do think for most people who just want a cool looking ship and to be functional enough in combat, I would stick with just the piloting skill. I'd say it's worth it for pretty much everyone. Ships really are far more than just space combat. It is your player home and method of transport, as well as your crew hub, and I believe they are essential for a good role-playing experience, and hence I can tell you right now that all our role-playing builds will have a starship section dedicated to a ship that matches the personality of the character so that you can have the full immersive experience. So make sure that you are subscribed to the channel so that you will see them as soon as they drop. I can't wait to see all the amazing designs that you guys will create and share online. Like the video to support us. Thanks so much. My name's Scott and I'll be back to nerd out with you again real soon.